This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Tuesday evening as we are on the precipice of Week 6 of the 2023 NFL Fantasy Football season. I am your host, Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Better Sports Network's High-Stakes Fantasy Football Show, and, of course, the FFPC. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman, and, of course, follow the FFPC on the X machine at FFPC. Welcome in to the latest episode of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown, brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I want to remind everybody that you can go to myffpc.com, that's myffpc.com, right now to play the Week 6 FFPC Weekly Challenge. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. You're just picking players, the players that you want. You can pick 10 of them if you want to play without kickers and defenses. You can pick 12 of them if you want to play with kickers and defenses. That is all going on right now at myffpc.com. All you got to do is pick your players and watch them ride throughout the weekend. Remember, only one player per team, so you can't do any fancy stacks of Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can't do any Patrick Mahomes and Rashee Rice or whatever crazy things you want to do. You can't do that. One player per team. Enter for $35, enter for $200, and win up to $2,500. Again, myffpc.com. Myffpc.com is where to go to play in the FFPC Weekly Playoff Challenge. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share this video with your friends and enemies, and get notified anytime we go live, because if you are able to follow through with all of that, we're going to bring on better content, the best content, and the best fantasy players each and every week here on not only the High Stakes Lowdown, but the Better Sports Network's HSFF show, and of course the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. This week, it's no slouch. We're going to have on a 65-time winner of the FFPC Main Event, the FFPC Bare Knuckle, the Fantasy Pros Championship, FFPC Dynasty. This guy has done it all in his career. He joins me tonight as he is going for a pair of $1 million grand prizes in both the FFPC Main Event and the Fantasy Pros Championship. You follow him on the X at Chris Birchby. Please welcome in the incomparable Chris Birchby. Chris, so glad to have you tonight. Thank you so much for hanging out on a Tuesday with the FFPC.
No, it's awesome to be here. I think I was honored to be on once before, and I feel like it was a couple, like 4 years ago, something like that. So I'm thrilled to be on. I spend a significant amount of hours per week on the FFPC platform and thinking about all things FFPC. So it's fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you, Chris. And obviously, anytime we can get the man responsible for keeping the Kardashian skin so clear and smooth and sexy, we definitely appreciate everything you've done with Kula over the years for the Kardashians as well. So we're definitely excited to have you on tonight. That will complete the Kardashian talk for tonight. But let's get in to what we're going to be talking about tonight. Jalil McClain plays Thursday night against the Chiefs. We're going to talk about what you need to do with him. Zach Moss, what a week he had for the Indianapolis Colts. We're going to be talking about him as well, with Jonathan Taylor now 1 week behind him as he begins his comeback to being the number one running back for the Indianapolis Colts. Let's kick things off tonight, Chris, with I don't want to say he's the story of the fantasy football season because it's still early October. We don't know what the story of the fantasy football season is going to be yet. But my God, Puka, a guy who was either picked up off waivers or drafted in one of the last few rounds of FFPC Main Event or Fantasy Pros Championship drafts, has set the world on fire. Cooper Kupp came back this week, and I think that collective sigh you heard was all those Nakua managers who have him on their team letting out a sigh of relief that, yes, this guy officially will have value, according to Sean McVay, according to Matthew Stafford. This guy is going to have value going forward, even with a healthy Cooper Kupp. The question to you is, based on what you saw against Philadelphia, who is does not have a good secondary, how kind of confident are you that Nakua is going to finish as a top 15 wide receiver this season?
So first, I mean, I got to say, I got kind of lucky on Puka as far as ownership percentage. I gave you a shameless plug for the FFPC software and ownership percentage. You can go, as you were talking, I just wanted to go double check, I plug it in here across all my leagues, including Best Ball, because I did a bunch of the Best Ball. He's my number one owned guy at 38.04%. Funny enough, he's exactly tied in the league. It goes him and Zach Moss are my two most owned guys. Adam Thielen is my third most owned guy. Sam Laporta, number 4. Isaiah Pacheco, number 5. And then I got a little squirrely Wandale Robinson, Kadarius Toney. Hey, Keontae Ingram, maybe my time is come. There's Zay Flowers, Kyle Pitts, Christian Watson, Dalton Kincaid. I'm still waiting on him. But no, Puka, JJ Zacharyson, one of the analysts I listen to a lot, who, I value and shout out him and Sigmund Bloom and, guys at Football Guys and, who really, listen, I don't have time to digest all the data myself, although I make a lot of database decisions. I'm relying on, some of the experts who put in just hours to put this stuff together to help me get the data I need. And, one of the stats conversations that JJ was having in the preseason on Puka was, BYU, they were trying to get this guy the ball. They were giving him the ball running back. Like they were scheming things up for him. And that's what, you do with good players. You try to get the ball in their hands, and he goes to an offense where, at the time, Kupp was still there, but, who's behind him? Higbee's kind of perennially disappointed. And I think he's got a real ceiling, to his game. Although I still ended up with a ton of him this year too. But so anyway, I got in on Puka early and, didn't play him in as many spots as I wanted week 1. I've made up for it. I mean, he's a must start for me everywhere. Is he going to be top 15 now? I mean, that's maybe, if not, he's going to be, somewhere close afterward. He's high enough that I'm going to keep on playing him until something happens. But he's, people are, lucky enough to get him at this point. I mean, he's a guy that I hope to have a Nakua jersey at the end of the year to represent all the wins that he gave me through the season.
And I think that's smart, right? Because we can argue whether he's going to be a top 15 guy or not. But when it comes down to it, basically what we're looking at is this guy startable going forward? And the answer we got, again, against a vulnerable Eagles secondary, the answer we got is yes, you should be starting him even when Cooper Kupp's healthy. And oh, by the way, just because Cooper Kupp is back now and just because he's healthy now doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be healthy the rest of the season. I've always said the NFL is a young man's game. If Cooper Kupp were to go down again, which, you can't predict injuries, but he is getting up there. There is a non-zero chance that Nakua could be the type of guy that is getting 15, 16 targets a game if Cooper Kupp misses again. And that's all we care about for fantasy football. Speaking of a guy getting a lot of targets at the wide receiver position, is another guy you mentioned to answer that question, and that was Adam Thielen. What did you like about him in the preseason when you were drafting all these teams, and how close is he to being a must start when the Panthers travel down to South Beach to take on the Dolphins this Sunday, Chris?
I mean, so I got to say, I even mistakenly let him go in a couple leagues when I started the season, including one dynasty league where I'm kind of playing for the next year as a startup. And somehow I'm still in playoff contention, and he would have been a big part of that. And I mistakenly let him go, and we'll regret that. But again, that's one of those things where part of the process, at least my process, is trying to get myself in the ownership and or coaches' shoes and their decision making. Because a lot of it just falls on that. If ownership, if they're making a bet on certain players, they're betting part of their career on that. They have only a couple times you can make these big bets and whiff, or part of this is not just a bet on Thielen, it's on Bryce Young. And they're still talking about needing to get him a wide receiver one. I'm not sure where that's going to come from at this point in the season, but unless they can, trade for Mike Evans or Devontae Adams, it doesn't look like Mike Evans is going anywhere because Tampa's doing so well. No, they gave Thielen a $25 million deal. Really, it's like a 2-year deal. I was looking that up earlier, and it's $11 million is guaranteed at signing. He's got an $8.3 million bonus. They can really let him go after year 2. Yeah, but they've got him in there, and I remember the skills competition they had. I don't know, like 2 years ago or something. Like he was just catching everything, and he's such a technician that he's that safety blanket. He's like an ideal safety blanket for a young quarterback. So given the lack of other options in depth there, it just seemed like things were lining up for him to have opportunity. And again, you look at opportunity, the coaches are going to give him opportunity and ownership because that's what they signed him for. They doesn't have a lot of competition on there. Yeah, he's old, and that's the knock against him. And I think people maybe went too far on that. I'm always guilty of that. You want to get the young guys and the ascendant guys, especially in big tournament plays like we do in FFPC, where they're peaking towards the end of the season and peaking during the playoffs. And a guy like Thielen, knock on him at the beginning of the year, at least, my thinking is, is he going to be, he might be soaking up some kind of low upside, high floor, low upside targets in the beginning of the year, but he's going to seed them to Mingo later in the year. And is Mingo the play that you want because he's going to be the guy come weeks, 14, 15, 16, 17, who's going to take you to the promised land in that offense. Listen, if you're banking on that offense, they have a good back of the season schedule. Bryce is disappointed. I was hoping he'd be coming out a little bit better. His processing time, et cetera, is what I was hoping would get him ahead of the curve sooner. It's still, I think there's still a good chance that it can come. He's going to come on later in the season. I think Thielen, I didn't think he was going to do as good as he's doing. Yeah. And I'm still, had lineups where he wasn't starting. And as I was going through lineups today, inserting him in places where, it feels even almost uncomfortable, but he's demonstrated he's the man. And so I don't want to, be too much results oriented, just plugging him in after the last couple of weeks. But, he's the guy there in that offense. And so, if you've got him, I feel like, unless you're a stacked team, you got to play him.
I totally agree with you. And I'm kind of in the same spot as you where I'm coming on to him, right? Like at the start of the season, wasn't really playing him at all. But I look at these target shares the last few weeks, and now he has been starting for me as a flex, as a guy that can come in and, maybe his floor, or maybe his ceiling is not as high as some of these other guys. But at the same time, like what he is doing, like as far as a floor goes, he's almost a must start. And then you go to Miami this week, where you think even with or without Achane, Dolphins are going to be putting up points. Carolina's going to have to keep up with that. You pointed out Bryce Young has already identified Thielen as his safety blanket. He's going to keep throwing to him. I love that call there. Let's go to a lesser-owned player and for sure a lesser-started player at the wide receiver position, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson was a guy 2 weeks ago, Chris, that I put in modest bids everywhere to try to get him as sort of my new last receiver on my roster, just trying to figure out and take a stab at this Giants wide receiver core, right? He goes to Buffalo this week. I know Buffalo is on the quasi-short week coming back from London, but you're looking at Wan'Dale Robinson on primetime in a Giants offense that's clearly broken. Is there sneaky startability with Wan'Dale Robinson this week, or is he still a stash for those players who have been picking up? And let's see what happens with Daniel Jones in this offense once Saquon Barkley gets back.
He's a guy that you can start him. That's, he's a condom start, right? He's the guy that's going to give you a really low ceiling, higher PPR floor. But I say high PPR floor, 8 points. He's going to be in that very narrow range of, he's going to give you somewhere between, 7 and 11 points. If he does more, great. Listen, I'm a Giants fan. I grew up in New Jersey. I try not to be a homer in my picks for fantasy football. Still probably have too much Daniel Jones on my teams. Pairing him with Richardson everywhere. So that's bumming me out this week. that just seem like they'd fall nicely if you're kind of holding off on QBs in the early season drafts. But it's is anyone good in that offense to start? I mean, I think he's been soaking up a lot of these. His ADOT is like 3.4 or something like that. I was looking him up before. So we're thinking about this. Yeah, his ADOT's 3.4. That's 99th in the league. I'll tell you one thing that I found on the plus side. Yeah, he's got a 28.2% target rate, which ranks 14th. But Saquon's not in, and he's almost acting like a running back right now. He's getting the ball at the line of scrimmage as he's popping out. So that's where I say he's a low ceiling dude in the fact that you're not plugging him in to win it, but you're plugging him in if you don't want to lose and you just need to get points. I mean, if you want to be safe, listen, plug him in. I found myself plugging him in some places, and it was uncomfortable. But I think he's going to give you points, and you look back at last year before he was injured, and I just remember he was getting 8, 9, 10, 11 targets a game. I mean, he's a guy that's shown that he can demand targets. And that whole wide receiver core is so uninspiring anyway that somebody's got to pop. And I don't think that Daniel Jones even has the time to get the ball to Hyatt downfield often. So unless the offensive line is any help, the one, potential kind of stud guy that they might have for put up some, big plays, it's just not going to happen because he can't get the ball out there. So I don't know. And Waller's, the de facto wide receiver one in that lineup. I don't know. At the end of it, he's a jag if you need points.
A jag if you need points, it could come in handy. Excuse me, this week, not only because of buys, but you think about all the other injury issues too that are coming in. So we'll get to that in a second. But the Giants are playing on Sunday Night Football. They are 14-point dogs on the road. This could be a back-end Wan'Dale Robinson start. That's something to be paying attention to, especially if you're dealing with, again, some bye weeks or injury issues. And the injury issues, you mentioned it already. Anthony Richardson, gut punch, right? And then fantasy players woke up today to find out that Devon Achane is expected to miss a few weeks, and Justin Jefferson already put on injured reserve, and Adam Schefter from ESPN speculating today that there's a non-zero chance that he doesn't return this season, which was a huge gut punch. That is bad if you have Jefferson on your teams. However, if you don't, and if you're looking to capitalize, obviously Jordan Addison makes for a fantastic start anytime Jefferson's out. Obviously TJ Hawkinson going to see a ton of targets now going forward. But the wild card in this, Chris, is sort of KJ Osborne. Now, he's owned in some FFPC leagues. He's quite frankly owned in a lot of FFPC leagues. But what about the players that are thinking of starting him this first week without Justin Jefferson? And oh, by the way, the Vikings are taking on the 1-4 Chicago Bears this week. Osborne, as a start, where do you stand on that coming up on week 6, Chris Birchby?
I mean, if you have him and you're lucky enough to have him at this point in the year, you probably haven't been playing him, and this is what you're holding him for. I mean, if you can't, again, it's one of those situations. If you're not playing him, you have to be. You're a fortunate position. You have a stacked team that doesn't need those points. But even again, you listen to the coaches; they're like he's stepping right into the alpha slot. I think he was already getting more snaps than Addison anyway. I mean, he's. It's not like he's just been sitting there hanging out. He's stepping right on in, and he's going to soak up. He's nobody can replace Jefferson, but if I had him, which I don't almost anywhere, it's insane. And he's only available in just a couple leagues, and it seems like maybe a couple dynasty leagues more than even kind of the regular season leagues. He's going to be probably the number one waiver guy this week for sure. If you have him, if you're starting him, unless you've got some sort of stacked team and you feel like you don't need to, but I mean, this is the week to start him. This is why you drafted him and why you held him, just for something like this.
And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, Chris, but not only are you starting him, but you're expecting starters numbers from him right out of the gate, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I would. I don't even know what they have as point expectation to be, but I'd have to think for FFPCs. probably got to be like 13, 14, something like that.
Yeah. Which makes, I mean, and again, you're talking about a week again with the injuries and bye week issues. Like he makes it for a fine start this week in FFPC leagues. Let's go over to the tight end position. I do a local radio show here in Northeast Wisconsin, a local fantasy football show. In addition to that, Chris, and every week we have to pick a pickup of the week, a sleeper of the week, a stud of the week, and a bust of the week. I picked up a bust of the week this past week, heading into week 5. I have been the ardent defender of Kyle Pitts. I have said, listen, this guy's got all the talent in the world. They just need to throw to him. They just need to use him properly, and he will put up numbers. Finally, I gave in. I lost faith. Week 5, Kyle Pitts was my bust of the week. And what does he do? He puts up 19.2 fantasy points in the FFPC. Your question here is, how much of an outlier was that performance? Can we expect more going forward? And quite frankly, what FFPC players want to know, what do I do with Kyle Pitts going forward?
I mean, I'll start this by saying I am a giant Pitts fan, so much so that when we were there was a new 5,000 dynasty startup this year. I traded up for the 201 and I drafted Kyle Pitts over Amon-Ra St. Brown. Oh. And boy, does that hurt. Do I come back there and just, and meanwhile, I have Sam Laporta everywhere. I have him in, he's one of my most owned dynasty guys. I have 21 dynasty leagues on FFPC. I have him in more than a third of them. I think I have him, I don't know, maybe like 8 or something like that. And I drafted in the first round. I think I was a later first round pick. Maybe I had like the 9th or 10th. I think I was the 10th pick or something. And I went with Gibbs in the beginning, and I was thinking about just doing this Detroit stack, and I had it all right there in front of me. And if I didn't take Pitts, and instead, where I would have taken Laporta, I took Kadarius Toney. I mean, this is how bad it is in retrospect when I look back there. This is the league where I also drafted. I was punting guys. I was taking a lot of young guys. I picked up 3 first-round picks for next year, and I was picking up a bunch of veterans. One of whom was Thielen, and I dropped Thielen first week. So this team just goes, it's bad and bad and bad. But then I also I picked up first week on waivers Puka Nakua. I have Jalil McClain. I've redeemed myself in many other ways, and somehow I'm in the 6th spot and still like fighting for a playoff thing. Anyway, long way of getting to it. I love Pitts. I want to support Pitts. Do I want to say this is an outlier? No, because I have him everywhere. I have a ton of Pitts. However, when I look at this, his snap share this last week, his snap rate was only 53%, the lowest all season. Week 4, he had 64%. Week 3, it's 78%. So his snap share has been decreasing. What do you? I don't know what to.
But you still love him. You still love him, Chris.
I still love. But I will say he had 11 targets, even though he had a 53% snap rate. 11 targets is the most targets any Falcon has had in a single game all season. So it's did they? Is he the squeaky wheel? I'm a big fan of the squeaky wheel. Dallas Goedert was the squeaky wheel this last week, where the coaches came out and said, "Listen, we know we need to get on the ball. He's still a big part of the offense. They got him the ball, and he's a monster. And Kyle Pitts was a little bit of that as well. So I wouldn't have this week because I was waiting for one of these games because the coaches. I mean, at some point, Arthur Smith, they have to get Pitts the ball. Is it sustainable? I don't know. I mean, there's TD regression, but then you're results oriented, and you can't be that.
Right.
I'm starting him probably in 2/3 of the leagues I have him right now, and it's really just dependent on what the makeup of the rest of the team is. I mean, I would love to say go for it, but he scares me.
Let me ask you this. We'll do a quick would you rather here on week 6, Kyle Pitts. Would you, and this FFPC player is going to be facing this, would you rather play Kyle Pitts at home against the Commanders or Logan Thomas, who's in that same game against Atlanta in Atlanta? Who would you rather play?
God, that is tough. That is tough because I say it's tough because the answer is Logan Thomas, but it's tough. At least I feel like it is because of just how he smashed. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know his target rate was off the charts, relative to the other receivers. And since he's been playing, he has a couple of weeks of that. So it's not just a one-off game. They're targeting him. Even though he's, 33 years old.
Yeah, he's not a young man. Not a young.
And, where's the juice there? And Pitts is, he's got all the juice in the world. But yeah, it's they're at home and, maybe, they just showed something. Can it continue? Yeah. I'll tell you whatever I say is going to be the wrong answer. So I'll say Logan Thomas because I have no Logan Thomas and I have lots of Pitts.
Lots of Pitts.
So
yeah.
That's another way I'm going to say it. I don't have any Logan Thomas. I don't even know if he's available on the waivers anywhere anymore. Probably
no. He may not be. And the only way probably that people are making this decision if they drafted Pitts early and they got Thomas late. Similar to that, you talked about being a young guy. What about another guy, a young guy in Dallas who is going to be playing Monday Night Football against the Chargers this week, and Jake Ferguson, a guy who is a former Badger, right, from my stomping grounds here in the state of Wisconsin. Would you play Jake Ferguson on Monday Night Football at Los Angeles over Kyle Pitts this week?
No.
So you're still going Pitts over Ferguson?
So I'm going Pitts there.
Let me roll one more at you. Kyle Pitts at home against the Commanders or Zach Ertz, who is also in Los Angeles, but against the Rams this week.
I got to go Pitts. There too.
All right. I'm with you on that. Like, it would be hard for me if I had any of those decisions. The toughest one would be Logan Thomas versus Kyle Pitts. I still think I'd roll with Pitts, but it is very close. But I'm for sure starting him over Ferguson. I'm for sure starting him over Zach Ertz. Moving on to the backfield here.
By the way, I found one Fantasy Pro league where Logan Thomas is still available on waivers right now.
Oh, there you go. Well, congratulations. And you can attribute this to your appearance on the lowdown because maybe you never would have looked for Logan Thomas.
You know what? You know who I'm starting right now on that team? Kyle Pitts.
It's fate.
I have Irv Smith and Luke Musgrave as well, but I would, let me drop Irv Smith here.
Yeah, for sure. Do it. Yeah, and Musgrave's an interesting guy. We can get into Musgrave here a little bit because I know when I was commissioning a lot of drafts towards the end of drafting season, and I was commissioning some live events out at the Planet Hollywood Resort in Las Vegas for the FFPC live events. There was a lot of people that started to pick up steam on Luke Musgrave, and I was a big fan of Luke Musgrave too coming into the season. And one of the Packers pundits I follow on the X said one of the cons against Musgrave this year is that he doesn't break a whole lot of tackles. We saw it last night against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. Caught like 6 balls, but first contact, boom, he was going down. There's still some value in that, Chris. But man, I think all the people that had the opportunity to draft Laporta or Musgrave and took Musgrave are kicking themselves right now. Musgrave could still be valuable, but I think his value is a little bit muted right now based on what we're seeing from him personally and what we're seeing from the Packers offense. Yeah,
unfortunately, I seem to have Musgrave and Kincaid on a lot of teams. I did it on, for example, I did a 3K auction out at Planet Hollywood, and we got Musgrave for $3 and Kincaid maybe for like 11. It's a $200 starting budget there. And that's a weekly sit-start headache for me. I have one co-managed team that I did, and I was lucky to have a friend, David Hubbard, pick up. I was unable to be there in Vegas for the final draft for this one. I had to make it home. I was coaching my son's soccer team. And so he drafted, and we're doing it together, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, two tight ends on that team, Kincaid and Musgrave. And I'm finding them, they're paired on a number of my teams. It's always, I was hoping that one of them would separate at some point. Certainly it looked like Musgrave kind of was, even though I think Kincaid is the better situation, is the better player. But we'll see. Hopefully, young guys, neither of them traditionally, are supposed to be popping so much. Sam Laporta, obviously, wow, what an outlier for a rookie tight end to be so dominant. But again, that you look at that college production and that whole offense at Iowa, all they did was funnel the ball through Laporta. And that's like back to how we started with Puka Nacua. You look at their college production and how these coaches schemed the players the ball and looked, they want to keep their job as well. Everyone wants to keep their job. And say, let's give the best guy the football as much as possible. Sometimes it's just that simple. And Sam Laporta, in retrospect, that's all, that his numbers and what they did there, he was an obvious slam dunk.
It's crazy to think about his dynasty value in the FFPC right now, too. Like the tight end premium, it's insane. I remember I was doing, I think it was the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, and I had Thor Nystrom on from Fantasy Pros, who is an expert when it comes to NFL draft analysis. And we were talking about Sam Laporta when everybody else at this time, this was back in like February, March, and everybody else was talking about Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid and Musgrave. And he said, like, remember that Sam Laporta was the only thing keeping the Iowa Hawkeyes last year from having one of the worst college offenses in college football history, at least in the last century, right? And that's kind of stuck in my head, and I got him in a few leagues, and certainly he's been crushing it. And quite frankly, with Jameson Williams kind of behind the curve, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown missed last week, like Laporta has been relied upon and been performing like a veteran tight end, which is impressive for him. And I'm already thinking, I'm always thinking ahead, Chris. I'm thinking about 2024 drafts where Sam Laporta could go in the FFPC. It could be crazy, could be out of control.
It's all going to be deserved. I mean, listen, in the Detroit offense and where he is, I mean, I don't know if there's, where I haven't even thought about it, but I mean, he's going to be second, third round, guy, and it's going to be deserved.
A guy who is deserving more touches in Denver right now is Jalil McClain. He goes to Arrowhead this week. He's going to take on the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. Javonte Williams, we heard the report today from, I think Sean Payton said it at his press conference. Javonte Williams was close to playing this past week. He did not. Samaje Perine is doing Perine type things where he's not wowing us, but he's not, totally, vomiting all over himself. Like he's doing yeoman's work basically. But when you talk about McClain and the excitement level that he brings to that offense, the big playability he brings to that offense, the fact that he is a pass catcher, which we covet in high stakes fantasy football, how close to startable is he this week? Again, against the tough defense in the Chiefs, but what could be a positive game script for him in the second half for a pass catching running back, chops that McClain has already exhibited. Where do you stand on Jalil McClain this week?
Well, I'm lukewarm on him, and I'll get there, but you're actually just hyping me up a little bit more on him than I was. And I like how you say what might be a positive game script for him in the second half against Kansas City. I mean, they're obviously, they're going to be playing from behind a big way. I heard the same soundbite from Sean Payton this week, and Javonte is going to be in. Again, Samaje, this definition of a jag. Although Payton brought him in and promised him a bigger role there, but he's also got to be thinking about his what his impression so far on the community and with the fans. And, the only thing exciting so far for Broncos this season is maybe Jalil McClain and what they have in him. He's a shifty, elusive back. I think he had 9 carries this last game for, I don't have it in front of me, but it was close to 70 yards or something like that. And Samaje had 6 for, it was like 15 yards or so. Again, I don't have the exact numbers, but it was around there. Am I starting him? He's, I think he's going to get run. His ceiling's capped with Javonte. But, the cat's been let out of the bag at this point. They can't put it back in, nor I don't think they want to, because I think Sean Payton's kind of very aware of how he's perceived at all times and his team or thing. Yeah, I just feel like he's going to, he doesn't want to sit the hot hand right now with a team that's already off to such a bad start when the fans would be like, dude, why are you doing that? I think he's kind of aware of that. It's just my guess. So yeah, I think I kind of find him in a funny tier with Zach Moss in a lot of my teams, where I'm in a sit-start dilemma, and these are the guys that I'm trying to figure out. Do I want to take one more stab at Zach? Man, he burned me last week because I sat him everywhere. And I have him, I mentioned before, he's one of my most owned guys. He's in 2/3 of my main event teams, and he was on the bench in every single one of them. And I could have used those points in every single one of them. But he's on that cusp for me. So he's in he's a flex cusp player that I'm deciding between in a lot of leagues, and I'm just guessing I'll have him 50% starting for how much I have him rostered.
All right, so I know stats don't play well on podcasts, but I'll read this to you. So McLaughlin was the leading rusher for the Broncos against the Jets this past week. 9 carries, 68 yards, and he also chipped in 3 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown. That's a really good performance. Until I tell you that Samaje Perine, while pedestrian on the ground, 6 carries for 22 yards, and I had to rub my eyes on this.
More yards than I thought.
Yeah, more yards than I thought. But get this, Samaje Perine, 4 catches for 73 yards for the Broncos. I did not realize that he led the Broncos in receiving, ahead of Cortland Sutton, ahead of Marvin Mims, ahead of Jerry Jeudy. It was insane for Perine. So I think we have to utilize caution. I think McLaughlin is an exciting player to keep on our benches. To use him this week against Kansas City on Thursday night, again, a short week that the Broncos will be on. And the Chiefs will be on a short week as well. The Broncos are 10.5-point dogs with a total at 47.5. McLaughlin's going to be interesting, given it's the first game of the week. I tend to not be too liberal with my start sits at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to go a little bit, higher floor, lower ceiling. I don't think I could start McLaughlin this week, but I think it's interesting for teams that might be in a bind, Chris, that might have to.
Yeah, see, I think I'm starting him a little bit more than you are then.
Yeah.
For kind of where I have him. But I also, Thursday night games are such an emotional component to it too, because if you make the right bet, you feel great.
Oh yeah, DJ Moore last week.
Oh man, yeah, David Montgomery killed me in a couple teams.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and DJ Moore did as well. I had a couple of those, him sitting as well, and just crushed. But it's I'm not expecting big things. I mean, he's another. I don't want to compare him to Wan'Dale's kind of situation, but there are some similarities when you look at his. I think he's got a kind of a higher floor. If they're gonna try to get him the ball, what explosive playmakers do they have right now that maybe against Kansas City they're going to want to showcase? They're on Thursday night. All eyes are on them. And he just had a big game. He's the talk of the town. So, it's just kind of tough from a coaching perspective to bottle that up and not give him opportunities. I don't know. Is he going to see 12 touches maybe? What's he going to do with them? And that's, for me, that's where he falls on. He's like just at that bottom of the flex for most of my FPC and main event teams. Just am I sneaking him in there or not? What are my running back options? But again, there's guys that I'm like, okay, Miles Sanders or him. I'm probably sitting Miles Sanders.
Right.
I know I'm sitting Miles Sanders. Who else? Ramondre Stevenson is another guy that I'm like finding myself in a predicament. And I'm like, gosh, and Ramondre has such a higher point of total expectation, at least as far as like what, the projections have in most sites, including on FFPC. But I mean, Jalil or Ramondre, I might be pulling the trigger on Jalil. So that's where it gets a little tougher for me.
What about this one? Jalil McLaughlin at Kansas City on Thursday, or Dameon Pierce at home against the Saints?
I'm going Pierce.
Pierce. Okay. All right. Let's do one. Actually, let me say this. I want to get into this later on. with McLaughlin. I might bring this up again. We'll see how we're doing on time. James Cook, I want to talk with you about. James Cook was a guy that I think a lot of people, as drafting season wore on, especially at the end of it, he was rising, had some pretty good games to the start of the season, and then he put up this clunker across the pond. 5 carries, -4 yards. He did have 3 catches for 25 yards. This is against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, you look at James Cook going forward. He gets a plum matchup this week against the New York Giants. This is on Sunday Night Football. Yes, Sunday Night Football. The Bills are 14-point favorites. You got to play Cook in this matchup, but how disconcerting was it for you to see what James Cook did in that Bills offense in London on Sunday morning?
It was bad, but if you're going to put him next to the other running backs and just what the overall running back situation for the Bills was that game, it wasn't really an outlier. His snap share, 62%. Basically, he had the same snap share he's had all season in that game. Mm-hmm. Nobody produced. It's not like the other guys were, wowing Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. I mean, nobody was doing anything. So I'm looking at it as an outlier. Disappointed, yes. Am I starting him with a little more trepidation in some places? Yes. But I think, I'm still having to go for it until I see, snap share and target share and just opportunity start shifting. You have to think it's just game script and a bad game and a one-off for him. And again, it's not like one of the other guys is popping and maybe the coaches are shifting over some of their responsibilities. Yeah, obviously he's not going to be getting as much goal line in that offense, but he never was. So that's not what you're starting him for. And yeah, when they're down, should he have been getting the ball more in space and, some dump offs? Yeah, and it didn't happen. And I don't know why, but I'm sticking with him in probably the majority of my spots.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect get-right game for him. So what he means on this Bills offense going forward, that's a larger question that we can answer later. That I always like to say, that's a problem for future me. I'm not going to worry about it right now because you are playing James Cook in Week 6 on Sunday Night Football against the Giants. Let's get back to the Zach Moss conversation. I'm with you. I had him on several leagues. And I'm quite frankly, Chris, I'm not really beating myself up over sitting him. I didn't play him in any leagues this past week. I never really considered it. Like the start-sit decisions that drive me crazy are the ones I sit and think about and I hem and haw over, and then I make the wrong call because I was this close to starting the correct guy. Quite frankly, I was never close to starting Moss this week. With the return of Jonathan Taylor, I thought that was going to gum up the works. It didn't, and Moss crushed it. It is what it is for Week 5. We move forward. But now we're in Week 6. To quote Kevin Costner in Draft Day, we live in a brand new world than what we were in 10 seconds ago, right? Like now we got to figure out what we're doing with Zach Moss this week against the team we're just talking about. They go to Jacksonville, do the Indianapolis Colts this week. Probably going to be with Gardner Minshew. What do you think about Moss this week? Second week for Jonathan Taylor. Can we still squeeze some juice out of the orange that is Zach Moss in Week 6?
Well, I mean, this is something that I learned first in poker, about you don't want to be results oriented if you made the right play. And I was with you in the same line of thinking last week, but I looked back and was second guessing and what did I miss? And, maybe it was some of the coach speak, we're going to ramp them up. They're still talking that now that they have Minshew, they're going to rely on their ground game a little bit more, or at least, there's obviously less quarterback runs or designated runs there. Mm-hmm. So I think we still have a week left of juice to squeeze in the Zach Moss orange. And it's funny, I have him in some leagues with Taylor, and I'm starting them both. At least right now, as I went through my first quick, looking around. Yeah, and part of it, and I hate making that's a real condom play there. I don't want to miss any of the upside, and but maybe there's even a high floor for both of them. I mean, you have to figure at some point Zach Moss is going to be a 25% snap share guy, and when does that happen? I'm guessing 3 weeks, right? Every week it's going to be a little bit more JT. They just gave him a big salary, of course. They're in the hunt right now. Their team's performing well. Moss is smashing behind that offensive line. Of course, JT should have a career year behind that line per game once he gets going. So you don't want to miss out on that. But I think how well Zach is playing, and now that they have JT under contract, it's different if he's on a 1-year contract. They just signed him to a long-term contract. If you're ownership and Zach is crushing and Zach's on for like nothing, it's like, well, do we want to run the tread out on this guy a little bit? Will we, ramp up our expensive racehorse that we have now for, the next 3 years? And the more I kind of think about it like that, I mean, I'm playing Zach this week in probably at least 50% of my teams.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see. But I own him in 67% or so of my main event teams, and just a ton of across the board. I own him everywhere.
I think, and I haven't made any hard and fast decisions on this, but I'm definitely much closer to starting him this week at Jacksonville than I was last week, and he probably will be starting. You say 50%, I'm probably going to be right around there as well. I don't think I own him as much as you, but I definitely own him in a lot of spots, and he's probably going to be starting at least half of them going forward. We are a day away from the Fab Run in the FFPC, which is going to be coming up 10 o'clock p.m. Wednesday night. Chris, I don't know how closely you've looked at this so far. We have not brought up the Arizona Cardinals running back situation with James Conner being placed on IR. We don't know what the situation is with Keontae Ingram, and there is Amari DeMarcado in Arizona, a guy who played pretty well last week, a guy that some high-stakes players I know were on already the last couple of weeks. You can talk about him if you want, if you like him this week, or maybe if you don't like him, tell us why. And then just anybody else that you're looking on the waiver wire this week as you try to formulate your rosters for week 6, who you're sort of looking at as far as bids go on the waiver wire tomorrow.
Well, Ingram was one of my most owned. I ran off a couple of my percentages for these guys earlier, and he was I don't know, my 5th ranked guy that I have overall, but that includes best ball. I dropped him in some, and I have DeMarcado in some. I think I have him in out of 21 main event teams. I have him in, I think, 6 of them right now already. I don't have him in many of my the FBG ones, but the FantasyPros Championship ones, I don't have him in many of those. But he's like a question mark for me. I don't really know them that much. I was just looking him up. I mean, was he 5-year TCU? I think he never really a starter, but he's always hung around. And I mean, I just don't know that much about him. But it's about opportunity. He's got the opportunity. Ingram, it was his neck. He was out, but he was their guy before. They were saying, listen, the coach speak in the preseason was high on him. And I thought, Connor is a guy that gets injured. They have nobody else in that running back room. They're going to be playing from behind a lot. Ingram's also a pass catching guy. I saw, an upside potential that didn't kind of match his ADP when you're looking for handcuffs relative to other handcuffs that are going higher. But now, I mean, there's obviously a wrench tossed in the whole thing. So I think you just take stabs at both of them. Is it DeMarcado? I can't even say his name.
Yeah, DeMarcado. Yep.
If I was putting a little bit at fab out for either one of them, maybe I put a little bit more fab out for him. But I'd just be putting fab out for both and just seeing which sticks if they're available. Obviously Osborne's like the number one guy this week to get. If I'm thinking about other guys to get, and I was looking around earlier, and similar to Logan Thomas, I found one league where Keaton Mitchell was still available. He's a guy that I've been snapping up quite a bit because I'm high on him for the rest of the year in that backfield. So, if he's available in any of these, leagues out there, I assume I'm playing against a lot of people that are listening to this in one league or another. So, but I don't think I'm holding too many, there's no gems I'm holding back really, because this week, it's outside of guys like that. I mean, I don't know. Are people taking stabs at Chase Claypool thinking maybe, finally he's going to come back to, how he popped as a year one guy. I mean, the guy just can't get his head on right. He's his own worst enemy. And players like that, you never see them kind of come back. But I mean, I don't know, in that offense and that coaching system, the fresh start, hey, he's a guy I just, stick something out on. I mean, listen, I still have a flame out for Justin Ross. The candle hasn't fully extinguished there, but it's going out really quick. I found if I have a total just nothing guy, maybe I'll try to sneak him back on for, a penny on a team somewhere. But, that's just because Rice is maybe looking like the best guy there, but nobody's really popping. Is somebody going to come out end of season? But that's real bottom of the barrel there. I mean, that's like the ultimate deep pick. I mean, I don't think it's a great week for waivers outside of a couple of those running backs.
I think you're right on that. Like, there's nobody I'm super excited about. Getting back to Claypool real quick, I was holding on to him in a couple of my dynasty leagues because I just wanted to see where he'd end up. And then I'm like, okay, well, he ends up in Miami. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are there. Obviously, those running backs. I could probably cut him now. And then I read the quote that Mike McDaniel said he really wanted to get Chase Claypool because he's fast. And that whole Dolphins offense is predicated on speed. And then I got to thinking, well, Waddle's no stranger to the trainer's table. Tyreek Hill has gone down. Like, I wonder what would happen if Chase Claypool was the number 2 wide receiver on that offense for a week or two. And now I'm not so sure what to do with them. And I think there's going to be people, especially because, as you just said, it's not a big waiver wire week. And I look at the bye weeks. We only have 2 teams on bye this week, not 4. Only the Packers, only the Steelers. Not a lot of fantasy goodness on either of those teams that people are missing out on. So maybe this is the week to take a stab on a guy like Claypool, see what happens, see how it turns out. I don't know. I can't imagine people are going to be going crazy for him, but I can't imagine that people will be taking a couple stabs at him because it's all about fit. And it seems like Claypool is behind some pretty talented players in Miami, Chris. But if he gets the opportunity, man, you don't know what could happen with Claypool.
Well, just like, I mean, you can tell a story just like you're doing to his path to relevancy. And, if the storyline is there, I mean, that's the first step to, it could happen in an alternate universe. Maybe it's already happening. I mean, I mentioned some bad dynasty trades that I've made before. I traded right after the rookie draft with Waddle. I traded Waddle for Claypool, and their ranking was just about the same across like all different consensuses. And, what did Claypool had 800 and I don't know, something yards in his rookie season, and he looked like an alpha stud. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'll just take a bird in hand on this one. He's already shown at the NFL level what he can do. It's all upside from here. Waddle is still the unknown. Let me make the play on the guy that's shown me something already. And we all know how that played out. So, I just checked earlier this week. I mean, I have my 21 dynasty teams. He's not on any of them anymore. And finally, I've cut the bait on Claypool. But, is it time? Is he going to reel me back in? Oh, gosh. I don't know.
At least this way, Chris, if he does reel you back in, it's a much lower stakes.
Yeah.
Like the thing, like I just coming to my mind when you're talking about it, I know I can think of off the top of my head at least 3, probably more, but at least 3 trades I turned down for Claypool that involved me getting a first-round rookie pick the following year. And I was like, oh, man, I got to keep Claypool for that. But it's one of those things. Like, like, we can pretend we know what's going on. We don't. Like, we're just making the best possible decisions with all the information that's at our disposal, and we go forward from there, which is not unlike submitting lineups for the following week too. And I know I'm asking you this early, and there's a lot of information we simply don't have yet. But as you look towards week 6, is there a player out there that you think not a lot of people are starting that perhaps they should be starting? And conversely, is there a player that everybody, or at least a lot of people, are going to be rolling out that you're saying you're doing the Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend? This guy maybe should not be started in week 6, even though he's going to be started by a lot of FFPC players.
This is a tough one. And I wish I had some good answers here. I really don't. I mean, the guy that I'm concerned about, we've talked about a lot of him here, Jonathan Taylor. I think I'm still starting him everywhere I have him. Do I like doing it? No. But I'm doing it. And that's not good. Guys that make me uncomfortable that I still see as I just took a quick perusal through, some of my teams and some of the, the decisions that I had that look like tougher ones. like I see guys like Chris Godwin. I mean, he still has a nice projection for the week, but he's been a real 1B in that offense. And although everything in that offense is surprising right now, do I feel comfortable starting him anywhere? No, I don't. But the projection numbers say that I should be starting him in places. I'm going to have to think about him a lot more and do some work because it didn't kind of jive. And I mentioned before, same things like guys like Ramondre Stevenson or Miles Sanders, where right now as it is right now, when I look to make some start questions on the team, the projections as they're being spit out by the software don't match my perception of what they should be doing. But then conversely, it's the same thing with guys like Jalil McClain and Zach Moss, who I think should be higher than they are. So and those are guys we've already talked about. So outside of that, I'm not really sure if I don't have anybody else I can really toss out there, but happy to answer any questions.
I mean and it's weird, like, because I know I'm asking this question early in the week, and you want to, the storylines that are going to define this week are Anthony Richardson replacements, Justin Jefferson replacements, Devon Achane replacements. If you are deep at running back or receiver, you're probably going to be okay. If not, you're going to have to figure something out. If you have a good backup between, like we had Mike Shope from WGR 550 Buffalo Radio. I know you drafted against him in the Bare Knuckle Challenge out in Las Vegas. We had him on the HSFF show on Better Sports Network last week, and we were talking about his quarterback decisions. He's got like Anthony Richardson and Tua Tagovailoa decisions like every single week, where he's got them on the same team on like several teams. And yeah, it stinks that Richardson's hurt, but at least his decision is making it's easier now going forward, knowing he's going to play Tagovailoa. That's what we're looking for. I think one of the most underrated things, and maybe it's underrated because it's so tough to ascertain and get a finger on, is lineup submissions on Sunday mornings. Like it can be so hit or miss from some of the best players out there, yourself included, Chris, and stuff like that can just drive you crazy. We talked about the Moss thing earlier, but it's not limited to that. I mean, there's plenty of stuff that happens each and every week, and you're like, God, how did I ever start this guy over this guy? Drives us nuts every single week.
Tell you, as you were talking, I was looking up another guy that we didn't mention or talk about, Jeff Wilson. Guy for waiver, jump back to waiver. I just found him in one main event, one Fantasy Pros. I think I have 46 Fantasy Pros or 21 main event. So just for relative of how often he's available out there, I mentioned that. Unfortunately, I only have 29 fab left in my main event here for this one.
Well, that's, at that point, you just put in the bid and whatever happens.
Maybe everyone's going to miss. Hopefully, if nobody's listening to the show right now, let's see some owners on this one. Zeppa, some hammerheads. There's going to be, they're going to be taken. Those are guys everyone should have been stashing the last couple of weeks. I'm surprised.
I said a couple of weeks ago when Achane and Mostert were both running hot, I said, hey, Wilson's going to be opening up his IR to return here shortly. And that's a player, if you have the room, like it's always about, again, the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast, Adam Krautwurst always says, don't drop running backs ever. When he says a little tongue in cheek, but that's the thing. Like you got to be able to, Darren Armani from Fantasy Mojo calls it the disaster recovery plan. You always got to have these players, these running backs ready to go at a moment's notice, because quite frankly, it is opportunity for these guys. They just need the opportunity. Think about all the people that were stashing Joshua Kelly, and that didn't necessarily work out. But Jerome Ford, it's worked out. Devon Achane is another guy that a lot of people drafted as a third or fourth running back, and now, lo and behold, they kept him on their roster, and then they can deploy him. He's the second leading rusher in the NFL right now. It's a weekly game. Can't stress that enough. And hopefully we gave you some good information and some entertainment tonight by the guy who has won 65 FFPC main event, Fantasy Pros, Dynasty Leagues, Bare Knuckles challenges over the years in Chris Birchby. You follow him on the X Machine at Chris Birchby. Chris, wow, what a show. So much fun, so informative. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate talking ball with you. Good luck the rest of the way in all your leagues, and hopefully we'll hook up again real soon. Oh man, Balky, what a pleasure. Thanks again for having me on here. It's always so much fun. What
what a treat to just be able just to, talk about this stuff for an hour. So again, really appreciate it. Appreciate everything you guys do over there. Obviously I love playing on the site so much. And, if you ever need me back, I'm more than happy to be back, but look forward to seeing you again in person soon. If not next year, obviously in Vegas. And for people that haven't done that, that's the best. So much fun. The community's awesome. And I couldn't recommend it enough. But again, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the kind words. Be good. Good luck in week 6 and good luck bringing home a pair of $1 million grand prizes this year, my friend.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice. Thank you so much. Chris Birchby, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown tonight. I want to thank Chris for popping on. Want to thank the FFPC and everybody, RotoViz, who helps put this podcast together each and every single week. We will go live again. Literally just found out during the show tonight. Next week's guest at 10 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday will be Paul Friel, a guy who has won 6 FFPC league titles over the years, a guy who's come very close to winning a massive 7-figure grand prize. He is going to be my guest next week. That'll be a lot of fun. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show is live at 7 o'clock this Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time until 9 o'clock. Broto Fantasy Football's Matt Ward will join me for the full 2 hours, and we'll get you will be your 2-screen experience as we lead right into that Chiefs-Broncos game coming up on Thursday night. High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour with myself and Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Commissioner Farrell Elliott will go live at 10 o'clock this Friday night. We're going to have the Fantasy Pros Championship 4th-place team owner, Brian Carrero, as our guest. That's going to be a lot of fun. So join us Friday night at 10/9 Central. Again, wherever you're watching this, we'll be on there as well. Go to myffpc.com to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. That's myffpc.com. There is no draft, no salary cap in this competition. It's a weekly game. You choose 10 players if you want to play without kickers and defenses. You choose 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. And just get them in by that 1 p.m. Sunday kickoff. Watch them ride throughout the weekend's games. Remember, only 1 player per team. There is no stacking in this contest. 1 player per NFL team. Costs $35 or $200 to enter, and you can win up to $2,500. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified anytime we go live on this YouTube channel, which again will be Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Friendly reminder that there is yet another London game this week, so make sure you are getting your Ravens and your Titans in time. That is a 9:30 a.m. Eastern time kickoff on Sunday morning. Once again, Baltimore and Tennessee. Get them in, get them out, whatever you need to do for week 6. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Really appreciate it, and we will talk with you again Thursday night. Thanks, everybody.